The last phylum of worms that we're going to cover are the segmented worms in the phylum Annelids. Just so that you know what kind of worms annelids are, I want to let you know of a couple examples. One example is earthworm, which you see here. Another example are leeches, which are ectoparasites, which you see here. And a third example are sandworms, which you see here. And no, they're not the worms from Beetlejuice. Some characteristics that all annelids have include that they are segmented worms. So they show metamerism, and that just means that they have segments or rings. The actual segment or ring is called a metamer. They're the first group to have a true body cavity, or they're solomates. They have this hydrostatic support as well. They have bristle-like structures called seta that are used for movement, and they eliminate waste through the nephridia, which are simple kidneys. In fact, the functional unit of our kidneys are the nephrons. So same idea, they're going to filter and eliminate liquid waste using nephridia. Annelids also have an open digestive system, so they have a mouth at one end and an anus at the other end. Woohoo! They have a closed circulatory system, which is a big step evolutionarily. They have 5 pairs of aortic arches, which act like simple hearts. So we're on the evolutionary trajectory for getting a heart, but all the blood is contained by blood vessels. And then there's a very well-developed nervous system. We have a primitive brain here, people. It's a big step in the right direction. So I want to point a couple things out in the diagram. The brain is this little thing here. Notice here are the aortic arches. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then you have blood vessels running down and also across this way. So that's keeping the blood circulating, but it's staying in those blood vessels, which is a big step in the right direction. As I said before, annelids are true solomates. So they have a mesoderm that completely surrounds the body cavity. And so we saw that in flatworms, they were asolamates. In roundworms, we saw pseudo-solamates. And now we have a true solamate. So we're coming along quickly in the worms as far as evolution is concerned. The body systems are more complex compared to roundworms. And some are ectoparasites, so they live on the outside of the host, but we're not going to see the endoparasites like we did with flatworms. Most annelids have separate sexes. However, earthworms are hermaphroditic. During mating, the worms line up with their ventral surfaces lined up against each other, and the sperm passes from one worm to the other in a seminal receptacle. The egg passes out of the ovaries and are fertilized by the sperm in the seminal receptacle, and then a cocoon is kind of made around the egg so it can develop until the juvenile worm emerges. I'll show you a picture in just a sec. Okay, so this diagram kind of shows what I was just talking about. They're lining up ventral side to ventral side, and they're joining by sharing the seminal receptacle. You can see that is happening here, and eventually the young worms are going to hatch out of this cocoon-like structure. Here's another good diagram of how they're lining up. One clitellum's here, the other one's here, and they're going to pass over each other, exchanging what they need to. And you can also see in this diagram here, there's one here, and eventually the point is that they will pass over each other. Segmented worms are going to play a large role in our ecosystem. One is that they improve the health of the soil by enriching and aerating the soil by burrowing through, making their little tunnels as they go. They're also going to help break down waste. They can be used medically to remove blood clots and reduce swelling. We no longer really use a lot of leeches on people. However, we do use the chemicals that leeches produce to help medicinally. Sandworms are major predators and decomposers of small marine animals. And finally, we do use worms as fish bait in order to catch fish. All right, so we're about to talk about the 3 classes of annelids. So the first class of worms that we're going to talk about are Oligoceta, and these are the earthworms. They live in dirt, they eat dirt, they help keep the soil loose, they add nutrients to the soil, they break down waste, they aerate. They're a big, important part of the health of the ecosystem. The next class is Polycheta. These are your sandworms. Most of them are aquatic. They do have jaw-like mouth parts that are used for feeding, and that's why they're pretty, I don't want to say aggressive. That's not the right word. They're pretty, they're a big predator in the water where they live. And finally, there's Huronia, and these are leeches. They are external parasites. They're going to suck blood, and they, when they do that, they first secrete an anticoagulant into the bloodstream to prevent clotting so that the blood supply never stops. They're constantly getting the blood that they need. But by secreting that anticoagulant, they're also secreting like a antiseptic. Not an antiseptic. They're also secreting a anesthetic, so you don't even feel that they're there, which is pretty crazy because they're wild.